There are many different factors that appear to increase a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Some of them are things we cannot really change, like getting older or having certain genes. But then there are risk factors we can influence. Things like not exercising enough, drinking too much alcohol, being socially isolated, having poor quality relationships, not sleeping well, and of course, what we eat. But if someone asked me, Dr. Hana, what is one of the biggest contributors we should be paying attention to right now? My answer would be this: too much sugar. And when I say too much sugar, I'm not just talking about candy or dessert. I'm talking about what happens deep inside the body: insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and eventually damage to the mitochondria, which are the tiny energy factories inside your cells. Insulin resistance can affect many parts of the body, but the last place you want it to happen is inside your brain. Unfortunately, in Alzheimer's disease, that seems to be exactly what happens, and it often begins in an area called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is one of the most important memory centers of your brain. That is one reason why, in Alzheimer's disease, memory is usually one of the first things to decline. The neurons in this part of the brain start producing abnormal waste products. Inside the neurons, you get clumps of tau protein, which are called neurofibrillary tangles. Outside the neurons, you get another form of abnormal buildup called amyloid plaques. So whether we are talking about tau tangles or amyloid plaques, the basic idea is this: the brain is accumulating waste that interferes with how neurons work. And right now, a lot of research is trying to understand the connection between sugar, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease. For example, people with type 2 diabetes appear to have a much higher risk of developing dementia compared with the general population, especially when we include both Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia, which is the second most common form of dementia. And when you look at the rise of type 2 diabetes over time, it looks surprisingly similar to the rise of Alzheimer's disease. Both of these trends also seem to follow the increase in sugar consumption over the same broad period. So let me ask you something. When do you think Alzheimer's disease was first discovered? It may not be as long ago as you imagine. I'll come back to that in a moment. But first, let's ask another question. When did human beings actually start eating so much sugar? Because before the 1700s, sugar was not something ordinary people ate every day. In Europe, sugar was considered a luxury item. It was expensive. It was rare. And most people only used it in small amounts, usually on special occasions. But that began to change in a major way in the 1600s. In the 1660s, Britain colonized parts of the West Indies where sugarcane could be grown on a massive scale. And this is connected to a very dark chapter in world history. It was not the only European nation involved in the slave trade, but it became one of the most significant. The plantation system in the West Indies and the Americas was built on enslaved labor. And from that system, Europe created an empire of sugar. As sugar production increased, the price of sugar dropped. Back in Britain and across Europe, sugar became more available, and it started appearing in more and more foods. Then in 1747, another major source of sugar was identified in Europe. A German chemist named Andreas Marggraf discovered that sugar could be extracted from beet roots. So by the late 18th century and early 19th century, you could say the sugar revolution had begun. Sugar consumption exploded. People began making more cakes, candies, jams, biscuits, pastries, and all kinds of sweet foods. In the United States, sugar consumption rose later, especially in the late 19th century and early 20th century, as mass-produced processed foods and sweetened beverages became more common. Then, in the 1970s, the rise of high-fructose corn syrup made the situation even more intense. Now let's go back to Alzheimer's. The first recognized case was described in Germany in 1906. Dr. Alois Alzheimer had a patient named Auguste Det. She suffered from severe memory loss and other neurological symptoms. After she died, Dr. Alzheimer examined her brain. He found that the brain had shrunk. And when he looked at the brain tissue under a microscope, he saw abnormal deposits inside and around the neurons. Today, we know these as amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. But even though Alzheimer's disease was identified in 1906, it remained relatively unknown for decades. Before the 1970s, there were fewer than 150 scientific papers published about it. Then in 1976, an American neurologist named Dr. Robert Katzman wrote a landmark editorial describing Alzheimer's disease as a major killer, the most common cause of dementia, and a serious public health challenge for the world. At that time, around 12% of people who reached age 85 were estimated to develop Alzheimer's. And between 1,970 and 2014, the worldwide prevalence of Alzheimer's roughly doubled. Interestingly, in high-income countries like the United States, the overall prevalence has stayed around 6.5% over the past decade. But in many developing countries, it has increased significantly. Today, around 6 million people in the United States are estimated to have Alzheimer's disease. And that number is projected to rise dramatically by 2050. So now the question becomes, how exactly does sugar affect the brain? Let's start with fructose. Your brain weighs only about 3 pounds, but it uses a huge amount of energy. In fact, your brain consumes about 20% of the glucose circulating in your bloodstream at any given time. But what happens when the sugar you eat contains fructose? Let's say you eat table sugar. Table sugar is called sucrose, is made of 2 smaller sugar molecules. One is glucose, the other is fructose. High fructose corn syrup is also made from glucose and fructose, though the molecules are not bonded together in the same way. Either way, whether you are eating regular table sugar or high fructose corn syrup, it goes into your intestines, gets absorbed, and eventually reaches the liver. The liver is the main organ that processes fructose. And one byproduct of fructose metabolism is uric acid. That uric acid can then travel out of the liver and make its way into the body, including the brain. And in the brain, uric acid may contribute to microscopic inflammation. More inflammation usually means more oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is dangerous because it damages cells. The more oxidative stress a cell experiences, the sicker that cell becomes. In some cases, it can even contribute to cell death. But that is not the only problem. If you overwhelm the liver's ability to process sugar, for example, if you eat a donut, or drink a large sweetened coffee drink with extra syrup, then some of that fructose can spill over into the bloodstream. And once that fructose enters the circulation, it can reach the brain more directly. That is when fructose itself may start affecting brain metabolism. And one of the most important effects involves cells called astrocytes. Astrocytes help nourish and support neurons. But fructose can contribute to processes like glycation and oxidative stress. Glycation is when a sugar molecule attaches to the amino acid portion of a protein. This can lead to the formation of compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. And yes, that name is very fitting, because these compounds are associated with aging. Glycation is also related to what we see in cooking. It is similar to the browning reaction. It is sometimes called the Maillard reaction. You can think of it like caramelization. Glucose and fructose can cause glycation, but fructose appears to do it much faster than glucose. So in a very simplified way, you could say that too much fructose may contribute to a kind of caramelizing effect inside the body. And if this is happening in delicate tissues, like the brain, that is not something we want. Fructose can also generate far more oxygen radicals compared with glucose. And oxygen radicals mean oxidative stress. Oxidative stress damages mitochondria. And when mitochondria become damaged, they stop producing energy efficiently. Eventually, they become dysfunctional. And when the mitochondria inside brain cells begin to fail, the neurons themselves become vulnerable. they may stop functioning properly, may lose connections, and eventually, some of them may die. But fructose does not stop there. It also appears to interfere with important growth and repair signals in the brain. Two important ones are leptin and BDNF. BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You can think of leptin and BDNF almost like fertilizer for the brain. They help neurons remodel themselves, remove old connections, and form new ones. That matters because your brain is not supposed to be frozen in place. It is supposed to adapt. It is supposed to learn. It is supposed to repair. But fructose can contribute to insulin resistance and high insulin levels. And when that happens, leptin may not work properly. This can contribute to cognitive problems. BDNF is also extremely important, especially in the hippocampus. Remember, the hippocampus is the memory center of the brain, and it is one of the first regions to deteriorate in Alzheimer's disease. Now, here is something interesting. Beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone, can increase BDNF activity. The body can produce beta-hydroxybutyrate during exercise, intermittent fasting, or when following a ketogenic diet. And BDNF helps the hippocampus form new connections. But fructose appears to impair BDNF activity. And this is one reason why different lifestyle habits may have such a powerful effect on brain health. Studies have linked exercise, intermittent fasting, ketogenic diets, and unprocessed foods with a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. Now, does that mean everyone needs to go keto? No, that is not what I'm saying. But it does suggest that improving metabolic health may be one of the most powerful ways to protect the brain. And when you look at the so-called blue zones, places where people tend to live longer and healthier lives, this pattern makes sense. Places like Japan, Italy, Greece, Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. What do many of these communities have in common? They usually eat mostly unprocessed foods. They consume very little added sugar compared with the modern Western diet. They are physically active. They have strong social relationships. They often have a sense of purpose and community. And these are exactly the kinds of factors we associate with better long-term brain health. Now, let's look at the United States. If you look at the map of states with the highest rates of diabetes, many of them are in the South, the Southeast, and the Appalachian region. These areas also tend to have higher rates of obesity. And many of these same areas have higher rates of Alzheimer's disease. So what is the common thread connecting type 2 diabetes, obesity, and Alzheimer's disease? One major thread is insulin resistance. And one of the biggest drivers of insulin resistance is excessive sugar intake, especially when combined with processed foods and a sedentary lifestyle. So, if you are asking me, Dr. Hana, what can I do to reduce my risk? The answer begins with what you eat. That does not mean food is the only factor. Exercise matters. Sleep matters. Relationships matter. Avoiding too much alcohol matters. Keeping your blood pressure under control matters. But if we are talking about one of the most powerful places to start, it is your diet, especially reducing added sugar and processed foods. Because the health of your brain is deeply connected to the health of your metabolism. And the same habits that protect your blood sugar, your liver, your heart, and your blood vessels may also help protect your memory. So please, do not wait until memory problems begin. Start earlier. Sugary drinks. Be careful with desserts and processed snacks. Watch out for sweetened coffees and hidden sugars. More real, whole foods. Move your body. Build muscle. Sleep well. Stay connected with people you love. Because Alzheimer's disease is not caused by just one thing. But the choices you make every day can help create either a brain that is more vulnerable or a brain that is more protected. I'm Dr. Hana Sasaki. And if you want more specific steps on how to protect your brain and reduce your risk, make sure to watch the next video.